Hey folks, David Stewart here. So, should you attempt to traditionally publish your book or should you go the self-publishing route? This is a question I get asked a lot via email and on social media, so I thought I'd attempt to give it a good answer here. This is part of phase 4 of the book creation process, the publication phase. However, you should try to ask and answer this question as early in your process as possible, back in phase 1 when you're planning. And the reason is because these two different publishing formats really require and allow very different products to exist. And if you want to be traditionally published, you need to make a product that will fit the mold of a traditionally published book. And if you don't want to do that, then you need to be thinking about how you're going to gain the skills to independently publish or self-publish. Before I get into lots of those trade-offs, let me talk about what I mean by these two. A traditionally published book means that another publisher that's not you takes the manuscript, prints it, sends it to bookstores and sells it and sells the ebook for you. The way that you get traditionally published, just so you know, you have to have a complete book. Just so you know, some people are trying to sell incomplete books. It doesn't work that way. You can't actually talk to publishers. You get an agent, and this is for fiction. If you're writing very specific kinds of nonfiction, which I can't really get into because I don't write that kind, but like if you're writing a history book on the Boer War, you'd find a specialty press that does nonfiction. But for most of us that are writing fiction, you got to go through an agent. And what that means is you find a literary agent, and you can find it a whole bunch of different ways, and you send a query letter to that agent that includes some requirements on their website for what they want for possible submissions. They may take a look at your manuscript and then they decide to represent it. That is the first hurdle you have to overcome in the traditionally published game, and it's usually a hurdle most people don't ever overcome. It's just finding an agent to represent it. The agent talks to publishers for you. They negotiate the deal. And of course, the agent's not going to take on a manuscript that they think they can't sell to a publisher. Publisher's not going to take on a manuscript they think they can't sell and make money on. So there's two different hurdles. They give you a contract. You may get an advance, but advances aren't always a thing now with traditional publication. An advance is some upfront money that you essentially are getting paid out of your beginning royalties. So they pay you in advance on your royalties. They keep the royalties that they would pay you for all the books that they sell until it reaches that amount, and then they can pay you additional royalties on top of that. That's traditional publication. They tend to do most of the stuff for you. You just write the book. Self-publication is where you're going to put it yourself out on various platforms. And I should say independent publishing, because independent publishing and self-publishing are two different things. Independent publishing means you're going to put it on the Kindle platform or iBooks and probably lots of different formats, and they become the publisher of record. Amazon becomes the publisher of record, and they sell the book for you on their website, and then you get paid royalties out of the book, or you can think of a percentage of what you sell the price for. You pay them for sending customers to that particular book. Self-publishing is technically where you are not going through another platform. Like you're selling it on your website, you're selling printed books out of the trunk of your car, wherever you're going to sell them. That's true self-publication. But those two things you can do at the same time. You can self-publish and sell the books yourself, send them off in the mail from your website, and publish them on Amazon. You can do both. There's no restriction on that. So that's what self-publication is. But that involves doing a bunch of extra work. You have to hire a cover artist. You got to format the book. You got to do all the advertising versus a traditional publisher, which does most of it for you. For that reason, most people are very attracted to traditional publication. But you have to be aware you need to make a product that is going to fit the mold of what traditional publishers want. So the first thing you have to keep in mind is the length of the book that you want to write or that you have. There's a lot tighter requirements for what's going to go out on a normal traditional publication mode. If you're writing a 30,000 word book, chances are that's not going to get published. If you're writing a 180,000 word book, chances are that's not going to get published. There are exceptions to people who publish their first book. I'm talking mostly to people who are publishing their first book. If you've published a book beforehand, you can probably answer this question to your own satisfaction. But usually a book that's shorter than, say, 70,000 words, maybe 60,000 words, it's probably not going to find its way onto a traditional publishing press. And that's because the market wants a little bit longer books, and shorter books, as you make the book longer, the price per page goes down a little bit. So the usual length is about 100,000 words. And that's because if you make a thick book, if it's too thick, it costs too much to print. You have to sell it for too much. The return on investment's harder. If it's too short, customers may not buy it, or you have a different little margin that's there. So 100,000 words is usually the length people want for the first novel. It could be a little bit longer if you're writing fantasy or science fiction, but not too much longer, maybe 115,000, 120,000 words. There are some exceptions in fantasy, like Patrick Rothfuss published his first book, and it was like 170,000 words. It was really, really long. I think that was Name in the Wind. But you shouldn't count on being like the exception. You should think about the best chance you have to get published. 100,000 words is probably it. I'm aware that Old Man and the Sea is traditionally published way back when, but Ernest Hemingway had published several books before that, and Old Man and the Sea is about 30,000 words. Today, if you were to write a 30,000 word book, you should probably just think about publishing it independently. That's going to be the best way for you to reach customers and get it out there and make a little bit of money on it. And if you want to write 30,000 word books as a series, independent publishing is really the way that you want to go. So the length is very important. Another thing you have to consider is how niche your product is, whether it's a wide market thing or it's something that's really only interesting to a specific number of people. And I have personally found this with this book, which was the first book that I independently published, Muramasa Blood Drinker. If you're to buy it now, by the way, you're going to get this cover with a bigger, cheaper book, which I thought I can make more money with a bigger book than with a smaller book, oddly enough. But I found, talking to some agents very quickly, that there wasn't a huge market for samurai fiction, especially samurai fiction with supernatural elements. This is really historical fantasy, but in Japan, it's a pretty niche market. And so traditional publishers are not going to put this book on the press if they don't feel like they can sell it to a lot of people. And it's unlikely this is going to be that black swan that people are going to suddenly be interested in some part of Japanese historical fiction the way they were with Shogun. But anyway, so I thought, well, I'll just publish it myself. And it turns out there's a lot of people who like this kind of story and like this book and really enjoyed the story. So I was able to get to those customers that aren't being served by traditional publishers. And I was still able to get readership and make a little bit of money on this book. And that's great. So if you make a niche product, you can sell it to a niche market and make some money on it versus having to hopefully sell something to a wide market. The niche market is a little bit more of a guaranteed amount of money, because if they're underserved, then they're going to buy whatever product you kind of give them, versus a wider market, there's more competition. So anyway, if you write something with a wider market, you're going to have a little bit better chance of doing the traditional publishing route. Another thing is how quickly you want the book to get to market. When you are traditionally publishing, it takes months to get a book from here's the completed manuscript, which can take months and months to do, to here's the book on the shelf. And if you want a quick turnaround time, independently publishing, you can do it very quickly. You can write and put out a book in a month if you want to, and I've tried to demonstrate that process. I ended up doing a 2-month, 3-book process, but I'll do it again this summer to try to demonstrate how you can make a small product and put it out quickly. So if you want to wait around for months for it to get published and for you to begin selling it and maybe making royalties and that sort of stuff, if you don't mind that, or you're not writing books really, really frequently and you don't want them, or you don't care about them being out in market all at the same time, then traditional publication is going to be better than that. If you're one that puts stuff out faster, then independent publishing platforms probably going to be better at looking at. If you want control over your final product, you're going to get more control over your final product if you do it yourself than if you go with a publisher. The publisher is going to hire the cover artist, and I made that video about Terry Goodkind slamming his cover artist because he didn't like the cover of his book, or he thought it didn't represent the book. If he had been publishing independently, he could have hired his own cover artist to do it exactly the way he wanted. He could have formatted the interior of the book exactly the way he wanted. He could have decided on the size of the book. He could have decided all of these different factors for himself, and the product would have been exactly the way he wanted it. Same thing with editing, right? If you want to keep certain elements in your book, your publisher may ask you to make changes to your book, and you have to make those changes if you want to get it published. Stephen King had to cut 100,000 words or something from The Stand before his publisher would put that book out. There's been some other cases recently where publishers have refused to publish books because they contain certain elements in it that they don't like. I don't remember the name of the author offhand, but essentially he had aliens who were objecting to humans having abortions, that they viewed humans as immoral and irrational for killing the unborn. The publisher's like, you got to get rid of that, so that writer went and published it independently. I think I talked about this with John Delarose. So if you want control over your final product, you want it to be the way you want it to be, then independent publishing is the way to go. If you're not such a freak, or you just don't want to think about the cover and that kind of stuff, or you really want a publisher to help you make a product that's going to be marketable, then obviously traditional publishing is going to be better. The other thing to think about is the cost to you versus return on investment. If you're traditionally publishing, the upfront costs are essentially your time to create the book, your time to query agents, your time to wait around and get it published, those sorts of things. And it may take years to get it published. Talk about the publication speed. I think it took like 10 years for Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson to actually get published. So you may be waiting around for a while, getting all the gears to turn, finding an agent, finding the agent to find a publisher. Anyway, so there's no real upfront cost to you other than your time if you do traditionally published, and the publisher essentially fronts all the costs. They do a lot of advertising. You probably want to do promotion for yourself if you're going to be traditionally published, like at least have a website, be on social media, promote your book. That's an expectation these days. But they're going to do most of the advertising, hire the cover artist, format the interior, hire proofreaders. They're going to do that whole business. But they're going to keep more of the money as a result because they put their money up front and they need a return on their investment. So your royalties are going to be lower. They're going to be usually 10% for like a hardback, sometimes lower. Like royalties continue to get lower apparently, and so do advances. It's usually less if you're doing a paperback. If you're doing pulp fiction that goes straight to paperback, it'd be 5% for your royalties, which is, pretty low versus Amazon, where you can make your royalties pretty high if you publish even a physical book. The ebook royalties vary nowadays with traditional publishers. They could be really low royalties or they could be higher. If you self-publish through Amazon, it's 35% is the standard, 70% if you're selling it for $3 or more. So if you sell a book for $3 and you make $2 and some change, you're doing really well. You're making a lot of money per book. So if you independently publish a book, you can actually sell less copies and make more money because you're keeping a bigger percentage of it. But you also have to put up all the costs up front that we talked about. So you have to hire the cover artist, you have to pay for advertising, you have to do all that. And you got to run it like a business. If it appeals to you to run your publication business as a business, then independent publishing, you'll probably be very successful in it, particularly if you have a good business mindset. If that's really unappealing to you, before you self-publish, you're probably going to want to at least attempt to find a traditional publisher. You probably want to give it a good go because it's a lot to learn just advertising. I'm still learning marketing to do my books better. And I've done zero advertising on my books and I've sold them pretty well. But I'm going to be learning to do that this year and improving my game. I have to approach it like a business because that's what's going to give me the return on at least the time investment, if not some of the little money investments that go into putting out a book. So you have to keep all of that in mind. And so those are some of the things that you really want to think about if you're considering these two dualities. If you're wanting to write a lot of really short books really fast, which is really, really successful right now on the Kindle platform, then go right to independent publishing and learn the lessons. If you like learning new skills, then independent publishing may be for you. But if you really care about the product getting out into bookstores, you write a little slower, you do something that more fits the traditional publication lane, at least give it a good attempt and give it a good go. And if it doesn't work, you can still self-publish if nobody wants to publish your book. If they feel like it's not profitable enough to publish traditionally, you can still self-publish it and make some money and have control over that. So keep that in mind and leave your comments down below into what you think about it. It's a tough business. Traditional publishers are having a harder time because there's so much competition from indies, but the indie market's also really flooded. There's so much competition in that it's hard to stand out and it's hard to make a lot of money. So it's a tough business no matter what you want to do. But as an artist, I'll tell you why I am independently published is I started with it because, it was too niche a market. And I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed learning how to do it. I enjoyed learning all these new skills. I enjoyed managing my books and thinking about them creatively. And I enjoyed putting out exactly the product that I wanted to put out, which in some cases would be like really classic fantasy, which probably wouldn't sell. But I really wanted to write the books that I wanted to write. That's kind of what mattered to me. and I've had a great time doing it. So you can make your own decisions about what you want to try and what you want to go through with. And I'll be trying to provide lots of additional information for all the steps that you need to go through to self-publish your book and complete phase 4 if you want to go that route as well. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can find me at dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. You could join my mailing list, dvspress.com/list. You can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/David Van Dyke Stewart. And of course, you can find me on Twitter, David V. Stewart, and gab.ai as David V. Stewart. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.